Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandy Upchurch. We have several of you already on board and listening, including my wonderful guests. Before we go much further, I want to welcome all of you to our mediation group's second April webinar. We're doing a monthly series. We're doing two this month, frankly, because I got really excited about the topic of leaning in, and they just couldn't hold me back. And they said, well, since you host them, Sandy, if you want to host another one, then please do. So today's topic is leaning in, and we are absolutely thrilled to be leaning in and already talking about maybe leaning in with some young girls in elementary school and middle school and high school, and all of our brains are just pumping as to how we can spread the word. I have some wonderful guests today who I would like to introduce to all of you. With me today are Maureen France and Elizabeth Schoonover. What's fun about the three of us is that we are very similar and very different as far as our backgrounds are concerned, and we're also coming at this discussion from many different angles, which I think is going to be a fascinating conversation today because of the way we all are viewing this a little bit differently. As you can see from a screen, Maureen France is one of our guests. She is the Director of Marketing at Duva, and she is also Professional Development Director or Business Development Director. Is that correct, Maureen?
Yes.
And she has worked in about every area of the business world and even the congressional world that you can imagine. And when we were talking earlier, she called it a man's world, which I could certainly relate to, because although there are many, many women graduating from law school these days, there still aren't very many women in leadership in the legal community. So I certainly grew up in a man's world, and my second guest, Elizabeth Schoonover, is doing the same thing that I'm doing, which is trying to womanize that man's world, and we're going to do it, by God, if it takes the rest of our lives, right, Elizabeth?
That's correct.
Elizabeth is an associate at the McLeod firm, and she has a 6-month-old baby. So she is leaning in a very different way than I'm leaning in. I have, professionally, maybe we're leaning in similarly, but she's at a different place in life than I am. I've got a 6-year-old and a 14-year-old, and Maureen's kids are in college, so she is now funding colleges. So that can't be fun, Maureen.
Yeah, two jobs.
So we're going to talk about how all of us make all of this work, and I hope that you all are interested. A couple of things we want to tell you about on the technological side of things. You should have a toolbar that you can see on your screen. If you don't want to see that and you want to see Elizabeth's beautiful shining face, push the orange button, as I think the toolbar is over your face, Elizabeth, that's why I say that. Push the orange button that's facing to the right, and that toolbar should go away. Also, I am not savvy enough to be able to let you all listen in and ask questions through your microphone or phones. I've done that before, and I get all sorts of feedback, and it's just sort of a hot mess. So what we'd like for you all to do is, if you have questions about Sheryl Sandberg's book, or a question of any of the three of us, or a topic you'd like us to discuss, please go ahead, and there should be a question section on that toolbar. So if you want to open up the toolbar, you can push the orange arrow to the left, and there should be a question section. You can type your question in there, and then I think press send, and that will come through to me, and I'll do my best to monitor those throughout our webinar, so you can let us know what you would like us to talk about. I'm getting a message from Kathy, who's telling me something, but I don't know what it is. Maybe she can come and tell me. She's kind of my right-hand man with this. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about leaning in, Elizabeth and Maureen. I know we talked a little bit over the phone and then preparing for today about leaning in and bringing the concept to our communities, and I already mentioned a little bit about we'd love to try and get this concept in the middle schools and high schools. I know that at 12:30, oddly enough, Sheryl Sandberg is having her own go-to webinar and her own lean in webinar. How dare she? Overlap with ours, is she's talking to recent or about to be college graduates. So I know that my goal for bringing it to the community would be bringing it to our younger kids. And I know we've talked about maybe I've started with the legal community here in Volusia County and over in our Orlando office, some lean-in circles. What about you women? Have you all thought about starting lean-in circles? Do you think there's enough buzz in your communities in St. Augustine and, again, in the professional world here in Daytona, Maureen, to get those started where you are?
Yes, I actually read this book about a year ago. It was recommended to me by a person that's been in business even longer than the 30 years I've been in business, and she kept telling me and emphasizing, this is your life, you've got to read this, you're going to totally relate to this. And after I read it, I think I was laying flat after I read it, because it just so resonated with the experiences I've had in raising children, and I have been raising my children pretty much on my own. My children were 1 and 4 when I unfortunately got divorced from a professional man I had been married to for 12 years. But anyway, I did think at that time that I wanted to have this concept and this book be out there, talking about it. I work for an ER physician group with a lot of women that are emerging as leaders in our group, and I gave copies out to them, those gals in my group that are younger than I am. I'm 52, and they really, really enjoyed reading it. I hope some of them are maybe even listening today, but anyone I've shared this book with, I've given it to numerous colleagues and friends, and everybody resonates with the topics that Sheryl Sandberg covers. And so, yes, we do need to take this on the road or down the street or in the coffee clutches or something, because we do need to get this information out there that, there are challenges for women. There is a gender bias out there. It does exist. How do we navigate it as women, and how do we achieve our goals, our dreams, and how do we integrate partners better and that kind of thing. So yes, I do hope that we are able to launch something even from this experience today.
I hope so too. And I know, Elizabeth, I know that you've been thinking about it, because when I asked you to be a part of this, you said, ugh, now I have to read the book. It's on my list of things to do, and now I just have to. So I know that you've been thinking about it.
Well, and we were talking earlier in preparation, there's never a great time for a new and difficult job to come up, or you're never just sitting around twiddling your thumbs and thinking, oh gosh, I wish I had a kid right this moment. But even on a small level, I can make a list of books I want to read, but it takes you forcing me to lean in and come to the table, in a happy way, but encouraging one another. And another group that I've recently become a part of is single working moms. I met a lot of them through the moms groups that I was in, now that I have a little baby, and I think they can benefit from Lean In as well. The idea of making your partner an equal partner in raising kids, and the idea of housework being shared. I think there is a lot that the gender divide has to conquer in that regard.
Well, we already have our first question. It looks like, let's see here. Oh, that's not fair, Elizabeth. It's your mom.
Oh, goodness.
She's feeding you a softball. That's not cool. Kathy, I'm so glad that you're listening in, and I know that you must be just unbelievably proud of your daughter. And so I'm going to go ahead and feed you the question, and I know that Maureen and I have some answers to this too, is how do you decide whether to return to work after a baby? I'll give you my answer, and that was I didn't have a choice. We are a 2-income family, and that's how we work. That's how we roll, and that's how we go on fabulous vacations, and that's how we That's how we are able to provide neat educational experiences for our kids and neat summer programs for our kids. So there wasn't an option for me not to. I also personally think that I am not a stay-at-home type of gal. I think my children are better in school and being socially stimulated than certainly I had the patience to provide. I do totally respect stay-at-home moms, and I sort of wish I had the opportunity to do that, and I wish that I was the kind of person that that would have been really good at that, but I just don't think that I was wired to stay at home, and that patient level is just not something that I was born with. But Elizabeth, how did you decide to return to work?
Very similarly to you, I had always worked since graduating from law school, and I felt like, my husband and I had balanced our married life as a working couple, and adding our sweet daughter to the mix, it's been great. It's not that much of a challenge because she's in the best hands I could possibly dream of at a little daycare / preschool, and kind of like you, Sandy, I don't know that I'm the best educator for my daughter, and I felt very comfortable leaving her in the capable hands of her great school.
And I think the socializing thing was something that we had a friend that was an early childhood development lobbyist up in Tallahassee. She's since passed away, but she was definitely a dear, dear, dear friend. And she sat me down one day and she goes, I don't know what you're thinking daycare is all about, Sandy, but it's all about socializing your child and giving them opportunities to be with other children and learn from them and be influenced by other adults and learn to be comfortable around other adults. And she convinced me. Of course, she knew that I needed to go back to work, so she was sort of bending her speech right to me. But it made me so comfortable with my choice. But it's not the choice for everybody, and that's what Cheryl says, right, Maureen?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think one of the things I really resonated with me when I read that she said, everyone deserves the support for whatever choice they do make. If somebody wants to stay home 2 days after having a baby, 2 years or 20 years, it's individual. It's all based on your own situation, your family situation. I had intended waiting, excuse me, till my 30s to have children to stay home, but after I stayed home for 6 months, 6 months, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm used to being in the workforce at that point for 10, 12 years. So, I felt the same as you two. I was brought up to believe that I was going to have a career, and I had a partial career, and I had to gravitate back to it. But my own daughter, who is married, has 2 young children, and she's staying home, and I support that. I mean, that's what's best for her family right now.
Well, I think that's what Cheryl says, is you've got to do what works for you, and that might change over time too, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about Sheryl Sandberg already. I am hoping that all of you are familiar with her book and her concepts and her perception of what she could have done differently in her career, or what she thinks she did right. She obviously was doing something right. But I want all of you to have an opportunity to go ahead and watch her TED Talk. My understanding is, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, Maureen and Elizabeth, is that this all started with a commencement speech she gave. I don't recall if it was Princeton or exactly where it was, but I think it turned into a TED Talk, and then I think it turned into a book, and I think the book is going through a couple different iterations right now. But I would like to make sure that all of you get a chance to actually see Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk. So I'm going to unplug for a few minutes, and I am going to play Cheryl's talk, and hopefully on the other end I am technologically savvy enough to pick this back up again. So I'm going to unplug and play a little bit of Cheryl, okay? And I don't mean Sheryl Crow.
So limited. And if you're in this room today, most of us grew up in a world where we had basic civil rights, and amazingly, we still live in a world where some women don't have them. But all that aside, we still have a problem, and it's a real problem. And the problem is this: women are not making it to the top of any profession anywhere in the world. The numbers tell the story quite clearly. 190 heads of state, 9 are women. Of all the people in parliaments in the world, 13% are women. In the corporate sector, Women at the top, C-level jobs, board seats, tops out at 15-16%. The numbers have not moved since 2002 and are going in the wrong direction. And even in the nonprofit world, a world we sometimes think of as being led by more women, women at the top, 20%. We also have another problem, which is that women face harder choices between professional success and personal fulfillment. A recent study in the U.S. showed that of senior managers, of married senior managers, 2/3 of the married men had children, and only 1/3 of the married women had children. A couple of years ago, I was in New York, and I was pitching a deal, and I was in one of those fancy New York private equity offices you can picture, and I'm in the meeting. It's about a 3-hour meeting, and 2 hours in, there's kind of needs to be that I.O. break, and everyone stands up, and the partner running the meeting starts looking really embarrassed. And I realize he doesn't know where the women's room is in his office. So I start looking around for moving boxes, figuring they just moved in, but I don't see any. And so I said, so did you just move into this office? And he said, no, we've been here about a year. And I said, are you telling me that I'm the only woman to have pitched a deal in this office in a year? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, or maybe you're the only one who had to go to the bathroom. So the question is, how are we going to fix this? How do we change these numbers at the top? How do we make this different? I want to start out by saying I talk about this, about keeping women in the workforce, because I really think that's the answer. In the high-income part of our workforce, in the people who end up at the top Fortune 500 CEO jobs or the equivalent in other industries, the problem that I am convinced is that women are dropping out. Now, people talk about this a lot, and they talk about things like flex time and mentoring and programs companies should have to train women. I want to talk about none of that today, even though that's all really important. Today, I want to focus on what we can do as individuals. What are the messages we need to tell ourselves? What are the messages we tell the women that work with and for us? What are the messages we tell our daughters? Now, at the outset, I want to be very clear that this speech comes with no judgments. I don't have the right answer. I don't even have it for myself. I left San Francisco, where I live, on Monday, and I was getting on the plane for this conference, and my daughter, who's 3, when I dropped her off at preschool, did that whole hugging the leg, crying, Mommy, don't get on the plane thing. This is hard. I feel guilty sometimes. I know no women, whether they're at home or whether they're in the workforce, that don't feel that sometimes. So I'm not saying that staying in the workforce is the right thing for everyone. My talk today is about what the messages are if you do want to stay in the workforce. And I think there are 3. 1, sit at the table. 2, make your partner a real partner. And 3, look at that. Don't leave before you leave. Number 1, sit at the table. Just a couple weeks ago at Facebook, we hosted a very senior government official, and he came in to meet with senior execs from around Silicon Valley. And everyone kind of sat at the table. And then he had these 2 women who were traveling with him who were pretty senior in his department. And I kind of said to them, sit at the table. Come on, sit at the table. And they sat on the side of the room. When I was in college, my senior year, I took a course called European Intellectual History. Don't you love that kind of thing from college? Wish I could do that now. And I took it with my roommate, Carrie, who was then a brilliant literary student and went on to be a brilliant literary scholar. And my brother, smart guy, but a water polo playing pre-med who was a sophomore. The 3 of us take this class together. And then Carrie reads all the books in the original Greek and Latin, goes to all the lectures. I read all the books in English and go to most of the lectures. My brother is kind of busy. He reads 1 book of 12 and goes to a couple of lectures, marches himself up to our room a couple days before the exam to get himself tutored. The 3 of us go to the exam together, and we sit down, and we study, sit there for 3 hours in our little blue notebooks. Yes, I'm that old. And we walk out, and we look at each other, and we say, how'd you do? And Carrie says, boy, I feel like I didn't really draw out the main point on the Hegelian dialectic. And I say, God, I really wish I had really connected John Locke's theory of property, the philosophers that follow. And my brother says, I got the top grade in the class. You got the top grade in the class? You don't know anything. The problem with these stories is that they show what the data shows. Women systematically underestimate their own abilities. If you test men and women and you ask them questions on totally objective criteria like GPAs, men get it wrong slightly high and women get it wrong slightly low. Women do not negotiate for themselves in the workforce. A study in the last 2 years of people entering the workforce out of college showed that 57% of boys entering, or men I guess, are negotiating their first salary, and only 7% of women. And most importantly, men attribute their success to themselves and women attribute it to other external factors. If you ask men why they did a good job, they'll say, I'm awesome. If you ask, obviously, why are you even asking? If you ask women why they did a good job, what they'll say is someone helped them, they got lucky, they worked really hard. Why does this matter? Boy, it matters a lot because no one gets to the corner office by sitting on the side, not at the table. And no one gets the promotion if they don't think they deserve their success or they don't even understand their own success. I wish the answer were easy. I wish I could just go tell all the young women I work for, all these fabulous women, believe in yourself, negotiate for yourself, own your own success. I wish I could tell that to my daughter. But it's not that simple. Because what the data shows above all else is one thing, which is that success and likability are positively correlated for men and negatively correlated for women. And everyone's nodding because we all know this to be true. There's a really good study that shows this really well. There's a famous Harvard Business School study on a woman named Heidi Roizen. And she's an operator in a venture capital company in Silicon Valley, and she uses her contacts to become a very successful venture capitalist. In 2002, not so long ago, a professor who was then at Columbia University took that case and made it Heidi Roizen. And he gave that case out, both of them, to 2 groups of students. He changed exactly one word, Heidi to Howard, but that one word made a really big difference. He then surveyed the students, and the good news was the students, both men and women, thought Heidi and Howard were equally competent, and that's good. The bad news was that everyone liked Howard. He's a great guy. You want to work for him. You want to spend the day fishing with him. But Heidi, not so sure. She's a little out for herself. She's a little political. You're not sure you'd want to work for her. This is the complication. We have to tell our daughter and our colleagues, we have to tell ourselves to believe we got the A, to reach for the promotion, to sit at the table. And we have to do it in a world where for them there are sacrifices they will make for that, even though for their brothers there will not. The saddest thing about all of this is that it's really hard to remember this, and I'm about to tell a story which is truly embarrassing for me, but I think important. I gave this talk at Facebook not so long ago to about 100 employees. And a couple hours later, there was a young woman who works there sitting kind of outside my little desk, and she wanted to talk to me. And I said, okay, and she sat down and we talked, and she said, I learned something today. I learned that I need to keep my hand up. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're giving this talk, and then you said you're going to take 2 more questions, and I had my hand up with lots of other people, and then you took 2 more questions, and I put my hand down, and I noticed all the women put their hand down, and then you took more questions, only from the men. And I thought to myself, wow, if it's me, who cares about this, obviously, giving this talk, during this talk, I can't even notice that the men's hands are still raised and the women's hands are still raised. How good are we as managers of our companies and our organizations at seeing that the men are reaching for opportunities more than women? We've got to get women to sit at the table. Message number 2, make your partner a real partner. I've become convinced that we've made more progress in the workforce than we have in the home. The data shows this very clearly. If a woman and a man work full-time and have a child, the woman does twice the amount of housework the man does, and the woman does 3 times the amount of child care the man does. So she's got 3 jobs or 2 jobs, and he's got 1. Who do you think drops out when someone needs to be home more? The causes of this are really complicated, and I don't have time to go into them, and I don't think Sunday football watching and general laziness is the cause. I think the cause is more complicated. I think as a society we put more pressure on our boys to succeed than we do on our girls. I know men that stay home and work in the home to support wives with careers, and it's hard. When I go to the mommy and me stuff and I see the father there, I notice that the other mommies don't play with him. And that's a problem because we have to make it as important a job, because it's the hardest job in the world, to work inside the home for people of both genders if we're going to even things out and let women stay in the workforce. Studies show that households with equal earning and equal responsibility also have half the divorce rate. And if that wasn't good enough motivation for everyone out there, they also have more, how shall I say this on this stage? They know each other more in the biblical sense as well. Message number 3, don't leave before you leave. I think there's a really deep irony to the fact that actions women are taking, and I see this all the time, with the objective of staying in the workforce actually lead to their eventually leaving. Here's what happens. We're all busy. Everyone's busy. A woman's busy. And she starts thinking about having a child. And from the moment she starts thinking about having a child, she starts thinking about making room for that child. How am I going to fit this into everything else I'm doing? And literally from that moment, she doesn't raise her hand anymore. She doesn't look for a promotion. She doesn't take on the new project. She doesn't say, me, I want to do that. She starts leaning back. The problem is that, let's say she got pregnant that day, 9 months of pregnancy, 3 months of maternity leave, 6 months to catch her breath. Fast forward 2 years, more often, and as I've seen it, women start thinking about this way earlier. When they get engaged, when they get married, when they start thinking about trying to have a child, which can take a long time. One woman came to see me about this, and I kind of looked at her. She looked a little young, and I said, so are you and your husband thinking about having a baby? And she said, oh, no, I'm not married. She didn't even have a boyfriend. I said, you're thinking about this just way too early. But the point is that what happens once you start kind of quietly leaning back? Everyone who's been through this, and I'm here to tell you, once you have a child at home, your job better be really good to go back because it's hard to leave that kid at home. Your job needs to be challenging. It needs to be rewarding. You need to feel like you're making a difference. And if 2 years ago you didn't take a promotion and some guy next to you did, if 3 years ago you stopped looking for new opportunities, you're going to be bored because you should have kept your foot on the gas pedal. Don't leave before you leave. Stay in. Keep your foot on the gas pedal until the very day you need to leave to take a break for a child, and then make your decisions. Don't make decisions too far in advance, particularly ones you're not even conscious you're making. My generation, really sadly, is not going to change the numbers at the top. They're just not moving. We are not going to get to, we're 50% of the population. In my generation, there will not be 50% of people at the top of any industry. But I'm hopeful that future generations can. I think a world that was run where half of our countries and half of our companies were run by women would be a better world. And it's not just because people would know where the women's bathrooms are, even though that would be very helpful. I think it would be a better world. I have 2 children. I have a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. I want my son to have a choice to contribute fully in the workforce or at home, and I want my daughter to have the choice to not just succeed, but to be liked for her accomplishments. Thank you.
Okay, I'm hoping you all can hear me. Elizabeth and Maureen, are you there?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh, I cannot even believe that I was able to do this. I'm very proud of myself. I hate to say that, but so that's Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk. For those of you that haven't had a chance to watch it, I loved the part about her brother. When she was in college in the English literature class, because that is so something my brother would do, which sort of leads us into our next topic I want us all to kind of banter around is what aspect of the book intrigued you the most? And for me, it literally pointed out the things that I have been doing or have not been doing that are I'm getting in my own way. you know, that confidence that my brother would have or that her brother had, oh, I killed it on that test, that's just not in my vocabulary. And maybe it's cockiness, maybe it's confidence, maybe it's bravado, but it seems to work. It worked for my brother. It worked for her brother. So, you know, it kind of was looking at, staring me at the face, and why am I not like that? So that was something that I definitely took home from the book. How about you all? Maureen, what was your take home, or what was the aspect of the book that intrigued you personally the most?
Well, like I said at the beginning, you know, there's just so many examples that she showed about how there is a gender bias already, and then we, just as you just said, we pull back at times throughout our career, and whether we're lacking the confidence or we're just in tune with the gender bias, or not, maybe not even conscious of exactly how that's working or not working for us. That was a big thing for me as well. The biggest takeaway though is after 30 years of working, I've just realized that I've had a series of slights over the years of working, and I noticed them as I went along in my career here, but everywhere I've been. I mean, I've worked on Wall Street, I've worked in Congress, I've worked in, you know, business, and I've had these slights not just from men, but from women also. And I think that big issue of how, you know, the stigma that women leaders are seen as unlikable and not, you know, nice, and seen as bossy, that hit me strong, because it is true. And I consider myself a compassionate person towards others and helping others along the way. I don't see myself as bossy. Am I assertive? Am I, you know, all in all the time? No, but yes, I am assertive in my career. So those are the things that, you know, really resonated with me. And the fact that, you know, I had all this guilt going along about being a working mother, you know, and feeling bad that my children maybe suffered. And, you know, there's a lot of evidence she presents in the book that, you know, it's kind of based more on emotion, not evidence that these guilt feelings are there, you know. Yes, we have to acknowledge them, but is it real? Is it real that your children actually suffer in any area of socialization, ultimate success in life, grades, whatever? No, they don't. There's no evidence to show they don't, and some actually shows that they benefit from it. So it relieved me. I felt that I wasn't alone out there. I also felt, you know, that I could get rid of some of this guilt, and that both of my children are thriving, and I did it by myself without the much help from a partner, so to speak. So it can be done. It's unique. It's individual, but there's a lot in this book. I recommend it for everybody.
And I would agree with you. I think that I know that Elizabeth and I have talked a little bit about the guilt, and I think Sheryl Sandberg, I know in the book, talks about it, and I know, Elizabeth, you were going to mention it. The guilt thing was something you wanted to discuss, and perhaps something that was a good take home for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had seen another interview with Ms. Sandberg, you know, years after giving this TED Talk that then led to the very successful book. And she said that at the time of the TED Talk, she almost didn't share that story about her daughter clinging onto her leg, that she felt it was too personal, that she was armed with the studies and facts and data, but that the organizers of the TED Talk really encouraged her to go ahead and put it out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why the book resonates so deeply, is that it's honest and it's true, and she speaks to the challenges that she faces and the guilt that she faces, and the on both the work front and the home front, you know, facing your shortcomings, but ultimately then being able to overcome them. The part in the book where she mentioned sneaking out of her office at 5:30 when nobody else was looking, like, for quite a while, you know, as if nobody else would notice, and then just being able to be at home with their family, that really resonated to me, because as a new mom, there are always needs that the baby has, and there's always something to do at home. But I do enjoy and thrive on having a busy work life as well. So just having Miss Sandberg as a model, 2 degrees from Harvard and the chief executive officer of Facebook and her time with Google, having people in our own communities, and Sandy, possibly having you as a judge in our circuit. You really you leaned in and sat at the table with this opening that our circuit has, and having you on the bench in a place where there aren't as many female judges or aren't as many female lawyers is going to be great for us.
Well, I hope I have the opportunity to actually win that election. I would love to be on the bench, and that kind of throws me back to something that Maureen said earlier. Maybe it was you, Elizabeth. Another take home that I had from this book, and it relates to my campaign for circuit judge, is that there is no good time to do anything in life. There's no good time. There's no perfect time to get married. There's no perfect time to have a baby. I know when we were thinking about having our first child, it was, let's have more money in the bank, or I'd like to be doing a little bit something different with my career. And then I've had several career changes and job changes that didn't come along at the greatest times. And, I think that life is all about taking opportunities when they are thrown at you. And that certainly is what I thought when these openings became available on the circuit court bench, was maybe this isn't the perfect time, but boy, it sure seems like karma or fate or someone is kind of screaming at me, and that maybe I should listen. And I think we should all listen to those little things that pop up in our lives almost every day, but certainly every week, every month, and we need to take those and jump at them for sure. That was my biggest take home from her book. We are getting some feedback from our listeners. Hector is a relatively recent stay-at-home dad. He's an attorney, and he is proud that we're doing this seminar. He is proud that his wife is back in the workforce, and he is proudly homeschooling his children while also being a stay-at-home dad, and which is a perfect example of what Cheryl says we need our husbands to be doing, is figuring out in your marriage and in your family what works, and not taking hits if you're the stay-at-home dad, not taking hits if you're the stay-at-home mom, not taking hits if you're the working mom, and just allowing whatever works for your family to be acceptable to you and not having to defend it. At the same time, though, Hector writes to us, he's telling us about many, many successful women in history, and he's quoting or referencing Margaret Thatcher and Cleopatra and Evita Peron and many, many others. Hector is a lawyer, and he says that his father was a prominent civil procedure lawyer for many, many years and preferred to hire women. What he goes on to say, though, is perhaps one of the things that we could talk about as a criticism of either the book or the women's movement or whatever you want to call it, is he says that in his generation, he's age 44, so he's my age, my generation and younger do not see women as a threat anymore. The new generation, let's see what he says. Hold on, I've lost my spot here. The new generation in shows like, for example, Hannah Montana show women in leadership roles over their male counterparts. Women have to take the statistics with a grain of salt, especially those that state that women CEO make less money. Marissa Mayer is making a lot of money with Yahoo. Hector, I partly agree with you and I partly disagree with you, because if you look at statistics, there are very few women leading businesses, high-end businesses in our world, and there are very few women that are leading high-end law firms in this world. Many women are opening up their own law firms so they can make their own rules and their own hours and have their own say in how things are going to be run. But I do think I don't think we're on even footing yet, and I don't think it's necessarily a societal problem. I think that Maureen and Elizabeth and I are all agreeing that it's not necessarily societal, because I think that we just are doing some things that are very intuitive to us, which is maybe not being as aggressive, and maybe not raising our hand, and maybe not volunteering for a job or a project that might get us out of our comfort zone. And I think we need to learn to do those, and once we do, we will be the leaders of Fortune 500 companies, and we will be the leaders of major law firms in the state. So there were some other criticisms that I think that that her book took, Sheryl Sandberg's book took, and I think one of them was a topic we all wanted to discuss as a group, and that is, you know, she makes it sound so easy, and even though she says over and over again, you know, I haven't done this perfectly, I am not exactly the role model as to how to do things right, everyone says it makes it so easy for her because she's got money for the nanny and she's making millions of dollars and she's got the money for the driver and the chef and the everything, and this doesn't relate to people. Maybe it doesn't relate to single moms that are working blue-collar jobs, and I know that we've talked about all of that. So Maureen, I know that you have some personal experience with this, so tell us a little bit about your perspective of that criticism of this book.
Yeah, I think that, you know, that's the first thing people want to say, well, that's a perfect world that she has, you know, all things are lining up, all stars are lining up for her. Let's face it, all stars aren't lining up for anybody at all times. You know, we have opportunities from time to time, and do we seize them? You know, that's something to pay attention to. But you know, waiting for all conditions to be perfect is waiting for something to never happen, because it isn't going to be like that in life. Anybody who's lived at all knows it, if we're honest with ourselves. So, you know, she's talking about her own personal experience, and I've had a different experience in that I've been on my own doing, you know, navigating a career and raising a family pretty much. I mean, so, you know, conditions weren't perfect for me. There were many times when, you know, I would just say to myself, oh, please, I hope no one gets sick tomorrow. I have a huge presentation. And if that school calls and tells me, come and get that kid, I'm done. I'm not going to be able to
And sure as you know it, that's when the phone rings too.
Oh, and it happens every time. I almost probably spoke it into existence, but you just have to deal with these things, and you can't let it set you back, you know. But everybody, I think we've emphasized a lot, individual situations, you know. But yeah, I mean, I don't think she should be criticized because she has a experience. We all have a different experience. It's what we make of it. It's how we deal with the lemons that were thrown, or the all our consequences are born of choices we make. And
the blue collar worker, if you want to call it that, I don't know if that's a politically correct term or not any longer, but you know, I just have to believe that the single mom or the single dad that's working several jobs is still got to have opportunity within that position. Maybe that's naive of me to think that, but I would still think that the worker at Walmart or Target is still going to have a chance to volunteer for a project that may be outside of their normal scope of duty, or a chance to be recognized by management and to continue to grow within that structure. I know that the same is true at Publix. They really like to hire and promote from within, and so I think that there are dead-end jobs. I'm not in denial of all of that, and some people have to take those dead-end jobs. But I think that many jobs have opportunity that come with them. And I know, Elizabeth, this was a question you specifically wanted to talk about, with single moms and dads leaning in, as you've been experiencing that through your new moms group. I hope that some of them are listening, maybe even submitting some questions. But what's your experience for how they're leaning in on their end?
I think the support that we can gain from each other and just accepting help and advice without judgment, women to women, I think we can be the most critical of each other. And another thing that Sandberg mentions in the book is that when you give a task up to someone else, be it someone at your office or with your partner at home, you know, share means share. So don't say, you can do the dishes, honey, but then hover over and tell your partner he's doing it the wrong way. But accept the help that's available to you, and then let it go and do your own thing.
Yeah, definitely letting it go. I think I've been guilty of that in the past, but now I'm pretty good with the dirty dishes going in whatever order they need to be, backwards or not. Definitely. I know one thing that is of particular importance to all of us is a work-life balance. I know specifically, Elizabeth, we were talking about this from your perspective as a new mom, and where do you draw the line? So your child is in daycare, so you're having to deal with this every day. So how are you working with this? Is it working?
It's working beautifully, and it's all due to how wonderful the daycare is. I wish everyone had the situation that I do, and I think with grumblings or rumblings or movements for like universal pre-K that's available to every mom for a reasonable price. I think those are great initiatives that our state needs to take. But yeah, the balance is difficult. Thankfully, I've worked at the job that I'm in for 6 years before I had my daughter, and I feel comfortable saying, it's a special day at her daycare. They're having the older kids' graduation, and I'd like to be there with my daughter. I feel comfortable leaving half an hour early or something. If I were a single mom or a single person, would I feel comfortable saying I'm going to leave early for an aerobics class? No. But that's a legitimate work-life balance that single people have to make too.
Well, and I think that's job choice too. We don't all have to go out into the world and find that job that with the supervisor or in the field that requires the crazy hours. Maybe that requires a job change. If you need the flexibility, then you need to find the right match for you. If if there's flexibility in your profession, I know in the legal world there certainly is flexibility. Probably less so in the business world. Maureen, would you feel that there's maybe a little bit less flexibility in your world, or what's been your experience?
Definitely. I think there has been less flexibility for rank and file workers, definitely. I've been lucky that I have been an executive level from a fairly early age, and I've always said to myself, gosh, how lucky I am to have the flexibility to go attend my kids' school activities or teacher conferences or pick them up or whatever I have to do, because I don't punch a time clock. And yet I always have been concerned for people that I've worked with that didn't have that, and I wondered how they did it. I've had discussions with people how they do it, and it's tough. I mean, they just don't have the choices, that I've had and the opportunities I've had because of that punch in the time clock. So yeah, I do think it's out there as a real issue, a challenging issue for so many people, especially in like our economy here. I would classify as more of a service, $10 an hour economy. There's a lot of workers out there that are faced with, I can't go take my kid to the doctor today. That's why society is opening up more choices. One of the businesses we're in is urgent care. We're seeing a lot of families accessing health care off hours,
Oh, thank goodness for urgent care.
Yeah.
No kidding.
No kidding is right. We visited so many earaches over the time, and they never get them during office hours for the doctors. It's all it's always at 9:30 or on Memorial Day. Always is when my children get sick and stuff like that. So maybe that is a valid criticism. How do you lean in when you are in the service industry? And I think something that you talked about, Maureen, that was well taken is you have got to build a support system around you. And I know for a lot of us that's family. And I know that there have been many, many times that I have not been able to make an event at my son's school for whatever reason. I've been in court, or I've been in a mediation, or I've had a presentation to give. And I send, if I can get my mom or dad or my husband's mom or dad to go, I send them. And if I've got one of my son's friends' moms is going to be there, then I'll call her and I'll say, listen, I can't be there. Would you give him an extra hug and kiss for me? And would you kind of wander around with him? And they, when you ask a favor, you are making a friend. And I know that's something that you, Maureen, and I have talked about.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that people like to know that you need help and they want to help. And sometimes as a working mom, you feel like you're leaning too much on the non-working moms. But I have been very conscious of not trying to lean on the non-working moms or the stay-at-home moms so that they feel like they're my crutch. But they have always extended themselves to me and said, hey, if you can't get there, let me know. I'll pick him up, or I'll do whatever. They want to help. They like to help. And by the way, it's easier for them to have my kid play with their kid than to deal with their kid on his own.
Yes.
You'll learn that, Elizabeth. It's going to be much easier for you to have a play date for your daughter than for you to be the entertainment committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
don't be afraid to ask people for help.
We did get a question here we probably should go ahead and address, and that is from, looks like Laura. She said, when considering having children, what is the best way to approach maternity leave when your firm may not have explicit policies regarding same? How do you feel confident that announcing a pregnancy may not cause negative effects in consideration for raises, promotions at the end of the year? Well, I don't think you ever have that confidence unless you are really sure about your supervisors and who they are and what kind of people they are. But how do you all respond to that question about you thinking about having a baby? And I know my response is, you go for it and you figure it out later. But that's not everyone's action plan. I'm a little off the cuff with things like that. But what do you all think?
Well, in my own experience, I planned to take a 6-week maternity leave, like my firm's policy indicated, but my daughter was born 6 weeks early. So
best laid plans.
Yeah, so especially with kids, and you guys are speaking to last-minute illnesses and stuff, you really can't have too much of a plan because it may not go as you and the baby thinks. But to address the question, I think just let your boss know that family's in your future and you want to continue working, and you'll do everything within your power to do that, within the confines of you and the baby who may have other plans for you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I cannot even begin
defining.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Maureen.
Go ahead.
Well, I want you to answer the question.
I think, I think defining for yourself what you need as it relates to taking a maternity leave, what it is that you are anticipating needing for yourself, your family, and adding to the family, defining that and, maybe writing it down what you're looking for and you need, and then thinking about it from a boss's or a company's or employer's perspective and trying to create a win-win. I mean, when I did maternity leave, I was working for a nonprofit organization. I was working as the executive director of Main Street DeLand, which was a downtown organization, and so I was the only employee, and I had to talk to my board of directors and help them understand that this was before email, before texting and phones and all that, that I would still be able to engage other people, volunteers in our organization to keep the ship afloat while I was gone. So I made it a win-win for them. You don't have to worry because I've taken care of this proactively in advance. So I think if you try to create the win-win and putting yourself in the shoes of the employer, go in there boldly and ask for what you need, but also consider it from their perspective. They do have a business they're trying to run. How are you going to help that? Can I be in touch from home 1 hour per day? I'll make myself available, whatever that may be.
I know I worked right after both of my boys were home. I wasn't necessarily doing office hours, but I was able to and wanting to. I didn't want anybody to feel like they were taking on my cases and my caseload and my workload. They don't need to get dumped on like that. So what I did was I did a lot of responding to emails from home, and I liked being engaged like that. Having a baby is tough, but it's not it's not rocket science. I didn't need to be on 24/7. Maybe the first few days I was overwhelmed and tired and, out of sorts. But after, several days, I really wanted to kind of plug back in and see what was going on at the office and help where and when I could. And nobody expected me to do anything heroic, and they didn't even expect me to check email. But it was just I don't know if it was work ethic or I don't know what it is, what you would call it. I liked still being engaged when I was home on maternity leave. It made me feel like I hadn't lost my touch, if you will. So, Maureen, one of the questions that you wanted to discuss, I think we've already gone over the single mom and dads leaning in concept, but one thing that you specifically wanted us to talk about was what would you do if you weren't afraid? And since you asked the question, I think it's only fair that you're the first one to answer it.
Yeah, I think that was one of the takeaways and the challenging questions that I saw put forward by Sheryl Sandberg in the book. And it even as long as I've been in business and the success I've had in my career, I am still afraid of some of the things that I have not accomplished, and how can I do them? How can I approach going to the next level, for myself. And when I saw that question, it has put me on a year-long, a study of how can I approach, the goals, the dreams that I have not yet accomplished. How can I get that fear out of the way? Because I addressed the fact that, yeah, I have some fear still about taking things to the next level in my career. And I have asked myself that question: what could I accomplish if I weren't afraid? Or getting you get your head going like, oh, your boss will think this, or other people will think that, or this might happen. And what if I left working and started my own business, or became a consultant? Then what about, what if I didn't have the money that month to pay my bills? And you get into all of these things, but how can you create success when you constantly are mired down by those questions that 95% of them probably won't even come true? I remember that from Dale Carnegie. We imagine all these wolves at the door, and 95% of them never happen. So I just challenge people out there, think about it. What would you do if you weren't afraid? What could you accomplish if fear wasn't there, if all those downsides that you create in your head were aside, and then go for it.
Well, and I think it's a matter of perspective too. I mean, I think the answer to this is people are afraid of failing. And I do a lot of yoga and try and take a pretty introspective look at things. And what I've learned is that yes, something that you've tried might not have been a blushing success, but did you learn something in the process? How would you have done it differently? Would you do it again? And what did you take home from the process? So it may sound touchy-feely, but I just really do feel like there is nothing that gets in my way that I'm not going to look at as, okay, I'm going to be a better person because of this. I'm going to learn from this process. I'm going to grow from this process. So I think that if you're afraid of failure, you can't look at it as failure. You've got to look at it as, what can I learn? Right. Elizabeth, what are your thoughts on what would that whole thought of what could you do if you weren't?
Sure. I think in the book, the topic of negotiation comes up, and the differences between men and women at the negotiating table. And something that she tells women is to be relentlessly pleasant. And it kind of also folds into, kind of fake it till you make it. That if you're truly afraid of failure, just pretend that you're not. And 9 times out of 10, you can surprise yourself with the accomplishments that you have inside you. It's great.
It's all there, right? You just got to tap it. Okay, the power of perseverance. Again, this was something that really resonated with you in the book, Maureen. So let's go ahead and talk for a few minutes about this. We, believe it or not, have a ton of questions. So let's talk a little bit about perseverance. I think that really it's just stick-to-itiveness, right? Is that what we're getting at?
I mean, there's going to be, we've already really covered it, but there's going to be bumps, excuse me, along the way, and don't let it deter you. Get back up every time.
So let's get to some of the things that we've been talking about, or some of these questions that have been sent to us. Let me try and go to the beginning here and see. We have one person here. How can I pull up this question? Why is it not coming up? Let's see. I'm going to try and read it in this small little square that I have. One observation this watcher, Jacqueline, is saying is that Sheryl Sandberg's children are very young. So clearly she waited to have them intentionally or not. As a result, this viewer is saying, I find some of the message to be unrealistic. I think, Maureen, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier today. I started my career and immediately had a child. My perspective was very different. If I had waited, been older like Sandberg, I think my approach to business would be entirely different. What are your thoughts on that? I get a little bit confused on this issue because everything changes so much. I don't know when people are having babies and when it's old and when it's young anymore. I really don't. I was 30 and 38 when I had my boys, and I still don't know. I feel like I was probably the right age when I had my 30-year-old, meaning more people were having kids at that age. And then when I was 38, there were less people that were my age having little guys. So, but I don't really know how to answer the question because I just feel like it's a shifting, moving target. Do you all have some better insight for Jacqueline than I'm able to offer?
In the moms group that I'm in, I'm 33 and I had my first child at 32. I'm like right in the middle. So some girls are 23 and some moms are 43. But the perspective is we're all in this together. What can I do to help you? What can you do to help me? Let's try not to judge each other on our life choices and do the best we can as moms, period. If we work outside the home, great. And if you're working inside the home, great too.
I guess what Jacqueline is saying is, there are different challenges in your career at the beginning than there are in the middle. And if you have more leverage to state your claim or stake your claim, I guess, if you're having a child in the middle of a very successful career than you are at the very beginning of what you hope will be. So I really don't know. I guess just other than discussing it, Maureen, what were your thoughts on that topic?
I think it's just always unique. Yeah, I mean, she might have the challenges that she had the children early, and so she didn't get a good foothold like maybe all of us seem to have had our children in our 30s. So maybe she feels behind the 8 ball, but I feel behind the 8 ball now. I'm in my 50s. I have one that just got out of high school, and I'm also a grandmother. So I've had other challenges on the other end from waiting. Some of them too, as it relates to the workforce. I think it's all what we make of it. I mean, take the bull by the horns. You've got your kids grown by the time you're really young. You can start a business. You can, build on your expertise of raising kids and being in the workforce. I think you can use it. You can use it however you've crafted your family situation. I think you can still be successful, very, very much so.
Here's a great question, and I think we should answer this. We should say, what would Sheryl say? It should be our new, it'd be WWSS. The question is, my daughter works for a company that recently changed managers, going from a young liberal man to an older man that is more traditional. The women are having a difficult time with his chauvinistic demands. For example, bring me a Coke. But are reluctant to challenge the boss. How do you reconcile the demands from the boss with holding on to your self-respect and your job? What a fabulous question. And
wow.
that is a generational thing too. that I deal with all the time in the legal world. I don't know how it is in the business world. I'd like to, but it is a generational issue. You know, older partners that have been around and practicing for 50 years have different expectations for your butt being in your chair for a certain number of hours a day than a younger, hipper boutique firm that started up with a bunch of people that all went to law school together 5 years ago. So I guess what would Cheryl say? Elizabeth, what do you think Cheryl would do in that situation? How would she guide someone that asked her that question?
I think that humor can go a long way in these situations. If you know, if a guy's being kind of a jerk to you and demanding a Coke, that's one thing. If you feel like going out of your way to help out a higher up, and you can do so, make him happy by giving him a Coke, go ahead with a smile on your face. But I think in the book she gives the advice of going to gaining the support of your team. If somebody's acting chauvinistic to you, it's probably not just you, and that maybe even asking a mid-level manager to intervene on your behalf if it becomes a problem. I think that's what Cheryl would say.
Well, I think I know what my husband would say is, oh, is there a magnet on your butt that is not allowing you to get up and get your own Coke? You know, I don't know. I know that that's not realistic. I know that if you want to keep your job, that's not something that you can say. But I do agree that there's probably some way that you could handle that with some humor and change that behavior. And change that behavior. Maureen, do you have any insight into that inquiry?
I've been there, done that with a lot of this, and I guess I have handled it in the way that I've just sucked it up and done it, because, you know, I'm somebody who is not below, you know, I can entertain the governor and I can clean the toilets at the same time at my company if I had to. I don't take it personally that somebody, or my boss or whatever, I mean, I've been asked to do what I would consider things that were beneath me. I've been a highly paid errand girl at times, you know, but somebody still needs to go buy the cards, the sympathy cards, and the wrapping paper for the client gifts or whatever, and, you know, it's just things just have to be done. Nothing is beneath me. I totally agree with using humor. I could see that particular scenario being like, take them the Coke and say, hey, you owe me a Coke next time. When I'm on a conference call, I hope I can buzz you and you'll bring it down the hall. You know,
right. I like that. And I also love your perspective, Maureen, which is, you know, I don't know if it's suck it up. It's just, you know, there are things that you like to do with your job and there are things that you don't like to do. And I don't even know if asking someone for a drink, it probably is chauvinistic, but if you could look at it as, okay, I've got to do a lot of menial things that don't make me happy, and don't take it personally. It was really your core message, and that could be very, very wise advice for sure. I'm going to see what other questions we have here.
And also, one last thing, don't, you know, pick your battles. Would you rather fight for a good maternity leave package, or were you worried about getting coffee for the boss? You know, I mean, just put things in perspective in that regard.
We have a comment from one viewer who says, I don't know if we've talked about jealousy in our conversation today, but the comment really is just that tons of people react to other people's success with jealousy and blame them for it. I don't think it's unique to women. I would agree with that comment. I don't think it's unique to women. And I also, I think I used to feel that, at least in the legal career or legal field, I used to feel that the women were in competition with one another when I was right out of law school and younger and starting off. And I don't know if I have changed or if the atmosphere has changed, but I really do feel like there is an atmosphere, an environment of wanting to help each other far more now than when I was just starting to practice. So at least in the legal world, I feel like women have each other's backs a lot more now than they used to. But again, maybe it's just because I've been practicing longer and garnered a little bit of respect in that field, and that kind of thing. Let's see, here's one. Okay, here's actually the same exact question we were just talking about. How do you handle women in positions of authority who are not particularly supportive of other women? Unfortunately, the experience I've had recently is that many women in positions of power look down on the other women and do not offer any help or mentoring. I have definitely heard this story over and over and over again. I am very fortunate to be able to say, I've never had this experience. It's also probably sad to say that I haven't worked for any women. So I don't know that I'm much help, but that might be a comment on what's going on in the legal world. What do you think, Elizabeth and Maureen? Have you had experiences like this?
I haven't.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll say ditto to your comment. Haven't worked for women. I've always worked for men. So but I've heard it out there. Definitely, I've heard it. But let's take a lesson from it and let's not be like that.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what do you think?
The exact same thing. I haven't had the opportunity to work directly for another woman, but to the comment about the jealousy, certainly it's not just related to women. I think I think we can be more maybe catty to one another, but I think the professional jealousy is just always going to be around, and that's probably part of the business and legal. It's just a given.
It's a life thing. It's a human thing.
Well, you guys, it is about 10 after 1. We have been talking for quite some time, and we have a very active and engaged audience. We have, at one point, about 61 attendees of about 80 that registered or 90 that registered, which is exactly what I had expected. And they're all still listening right now. So without further ado, I cannot thank you enough, Maureen and Elizabeth, for this wonderful conversation. I felt like we've just sat around and had a coffee talk like they do on SNL, but it's been meaningful and helpful and fun at the same time. So I hope we can keep this momentum going. I hope that our audience is interested in enough to maybe ask us to continue this, and I hope we can start spreading the word about leaning in and banning bossy to our daughters and our nieces and the younger women in our community. I think that they could stand to benefit from it a heck of a lot more than even we can, even though we're loving the book. So I have a feeling that those of you that have not read the book yet will run out and grab it and read it. At least I hope that you will. I know, Elizabeth, you've just recently read it. You're going to be digesting this book for months and months and months. I know Maureen's already alluded to that. I read it months and months ago and am still digesting and learning new things and figuring it out. There is no CLE accompanied by today's webinar. I hope that you all aren't ready to kill me for not saying that at the beginning. I forgot to do that. But I hope that you feel that you benefited enough that it doesn't matter. So on behalf of Upchurch, Watson, White, and Max, and Maureen France and Elizabeth Schoonover, I want to thank all of you for attending. It has been our pleasure to talk with you and share with you our thoughts and to share with everyone your thoughts when you contributed with your questions. And from all of us to all of you, I say ciao for now, and I hope you listen in next time. Thank you. Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Maureen.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.